Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm very conscious that I'm standing between yourselves and the bar, so I shall give a short presentation on a recent experience that we had in Telefonica, and hopefully you'll find that one interesting. So let me just say first of all, so Telefonica is the name of the company, but just you probably also know it as O2. Telefonica is the parent company, and O2 in the UK. But what I want to talk today is about a business which Telefonica started. Telefonica have a number of businesses in the UK, and the one I want to talk about today is called giffgaff. So I guess my first bit of audience participation is if you could put your hands up if you, prior to seeing the programme notes for today, if you've heard of giffgaff before. So that's not a bad hit rate. I was expecting perhaps a little bit more, but that's pretty good. I need to get back to the brand guys. Does anyone actually have a giffgaff product, or SIM, or anyone who's children know? Okay, good. Prospects, that's what I like to see. So perhaps after this talk, you'll be out to get one. So let me talk first of all about myself. So how do I fit into the picture? So I'm at Telefonica at the moment in the IT strategy team, but at the time that we started up giffgaff, I was the CTO during the founding and startup phase of it. So it's something I'm very proud to be associated with, and I want to be able to tell you that story today about how we got there. A little bit of background as well on the timescales. I think it was March 2009, the last week of the CEO, Mike Fairman of giffgaff, was appointed on his first day on the Monday. He interviewed me, and I started on the Friday. So it was all very, very quick, and we literally had nothing except a set of slides and a little bit of money, of course, to seed it, but we had literally nothing else. We had to build everything. So that's the thing. So let's move on then and see, so what exactly is giffgaff? So the fundamental idea behind giffgaff is that it's a people-powered phone network, and their strapline is it's the mobile network run by you. So what does that mean? First of all, it means that the users of the phone are called members rather than subscribers, and they're very much part of the mobile phone network. So it's an idea where the members themselves actually get very heavily involved in the service and the operation of the service. So in particular, there is something called Member Get Member, which is the sales side of things, which is to help distribute the product and raise awareness of the brand. So the members get involved in that. There is also a whole set of customer service, forum and community kind of help pages all around using and operating the service and getting help and support with using the service, and members are very much involved in that aspect as well. And the third element is people-powered marketing, where giffgaff was an unknown brand when it was launched, and it's very difficult to launch a brand into a competitive market like the UK phone market. So there was a chance, which is again pretty unique, I think, for the actual users of the service to actually do the marketing and promotion of it as well. So I'm not sure if it's unique in the world. I haven't heard of anything, certainly unique in the UK. I haven't heard of anything similar around. So it was a very different way of running a mobile phone network. So where did the idea come from? So it all came about by some smart people inside of Telefonica thinking about Web 2.0 services. How do they work? What are the characteristics of them? So if you're looking at services like Wikipedia, which we all know as being a way to collaborate on working and producing a single product, and refining it continuously and getting a better product every day. Increasing trends that we're seeing on Facebook and Twitter, where very much users are recommending products and brands to each other, and that was a very powerful way of getting your marketing message across by those sort of social media channels. Outlets, there's a few of them. Yahoo Answers, Get Satisfaction is an interesting one as well, because I think it certainly was at the time, I'm not sure if it's still the same, where users were able to get together under the forum and talk about the product and services of a company, even necessarily without the company's consent. So Get Satisfaction, you could just set up a forum on Nokia or whichever brand you wanted to talk about and participate in those. And those were already emerging as trends at the time. So there was a number of aspects of Web 2.0 that was really interesting. We thought, can this be applied to a mobile phone network? In particular, one interesting case study that we came across involved WD-40, which you'll all know is the oil. And they had not really changed their product, I think, for some 30 odd years. It had been the same product. And they launched a little experiment in terms of social media and so on, and asked their users the product, what do they think of it and what could they do? And they were overwhelmed by the response that they got back, with people talking about how they used the product and they really liked it, but they really hated that little straw thing with the elastic band and that kind of thing. So they actually made their first product improvement, I think, for 30 years, which was the new nozzle to actually improve the way that the oil is dispensed. So that's a good example of crowdsourcing in that generic sense and using that customer feedback in a positive way to feed back into your product. So really having customers intimately involved with the mobile phone network is the idea behind that, and to see whether we could replicate something similar. I think a traditional telco network is really very much about the telco talking to you as a customer and talking back. It certainly doesn't encourage necessarily customers talking to each other or having that wider forum. So it didn't really exist prior to giffgaff. So the other aspect of the service was to be able to give something back, and that's done in a very different way from a typical loyalty scheme in a mobile network might be linked to how much airtime you buy, or you get something back for a bundle each month of your usage. All that kind of things are very typical type of schemes. And the way that giffgaff wanted to implement the reward scheme was really from rewarding your contributions to the community and helping to grow the product and the brand. So to that end, you get points payback, as it is, for making sales. So if you give a SIM to your friend and he or she activates it, they'll get some points. If you help out on the forum, you'll get some points for that as well, and so on. So, and you can exchange that points for real money. It's it's cash, or you can have airtime, or you can donate it to charity. So there's a wider charity angle as well. But most of all, really, the idea was to, at the time, the mobile phone market is very complex, lots of different products and tariffs. So keep it simple, have a SIM-only tariff, one tariff, and then use those savings that you get from having those low operational costs and really pass those on to the customers in all aspects. So what did we adopt when what principles were we adopting when we built this network? So it was envisaged right from the very beginning when we put this thing together, and obviously there was a business case put together for the investment that Telefonica made, that the whole operation would be virtualized in some sense. You wouldn't really have any big office, well, certainly not big offices. You wouldn't necessarily have the data centers and all the big call centers fall to the roof of agents. So it was envisaged that there would be a core permanent team of around 20 people, and it's perhaps a bit bigger than that today, but it's that sort of order of magnitude. We've got a small office over in Beaconsfield. So that means that not only do we have to think about technology and how to deploy that and the considerations there, but we also have to think about the ongoing operations. How does our run organisation actually exist in where we need to be offered 24/7 service, but we've only got this small core team. So it isn't just about where the technology goes, but also the organisation that goes with it. We still need agents, of course, because there will be certain aspects that a community will never be able to answer. For example, queries about your credit card, confidential things to do with your account, mobile number portability. So there's certain processes that you do need to have carried out, but the idea was that those would not be done in a call centre. They would be done there would be agents, but the idea would be that it's very much like an email, called email, but not really using email product, but using a forms-based product to service the queries rather than the call centre. We didn't want to have big data centres. We didn't want PCs under desks and all that kind of stuff. So we really had to think right from the beginning about how we wanted to design the technology in the organisation to get really the optimum design for what this network would look like. And certainly my background, and probably a lot of people here up until that point, was to use what you might call traditional methods to roll out services. You have CapEx investments, you've got independent software vendors, you've got a data centre of your own. You've got in-house domain expertise on various different aspects of mobile technology. So we didn't really have any of that, so we had to adopt a different approach. So it probably won't be a surprise to learn that we use the cloud for that. And really, the key thing to take away is, as I've said, the whole operation was to be virtualised and nothing really owned on the ground. So everything is hosted to operate the core service in the cloud somewhere. So I've picked out some key items which I'll walk through with you just to give a bit more detail. But things I've not shown on this diagram, which is not necessarily relevant particularly for this forum, but we obviously need connectivity to a mobile network to provide the service, and that was the O2 network. So there was something called an MVNE platform, which is a kind of an API that operators exposed to allow you to run MVNOs on top of them, which are virtual operators, which giffgaff is. And there was also a fulfillment centre to actually dispatch the physical product, the physical SIMs out to people. But apart from that, everything else was run online as an online-only product. So, excuse me, the thing I've labelled as shop on the diagram is it's the shop, but it's also the homepage, the portal, and then really the main landing point for the customers to go to. So that's a traditional infrastructure as a service model, and we've talked about a lot of that today, really. But we had to add into that. We didn't just want a traditional hosting agreement because, as I said, we also needed to have level 1, level 2 operations. So we had to actually find a provider who could not only look after the infrastructure for us, but could also get up to that application stack, which was our own stack of open source software that we put on top for the shop. So we need to get our hosting provider familiar with that, which I think is an unusual arrangement perhaps for the infrastructure service providers. So we had quite a lot of demands there. We also had some platform as a service in the form of NeoLane and MicroStrategy. And what that was really used for is a big part of the service is generating a lot of data and analytics on that data. And a key thing really is to get your brand out, that you need to be able to analyse as much data as you can get in when people are visiting websites, buying product and the sales pipeline, all that kind of stuff. So we deployed a cloud version of NeoLane, which is a campaign management, campaign execution environment, which really gave a really powerful tool set to the marketing and the customer service guys to really enable them to build their own campaigns and that kind of thing in the cloud. So that became our platform for reporting, and also was a back-end interface for the business side, really. So the users didn't really see that bit of it, but it was key to actually making the whole operation run. So we also have some community tools, which I've called Forum, but there's a bag of tools in that whole area, which Lithium Technologies provided for us. And the key element of that, or the core element of that, I suppose, is the forums, which actually are traditional forums, as you might see, but we actually had to implement some special use cases to really work in the actual user journey flow that we wanted to do, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. The other things that's on, there's a blog on there, ideas management, for actually capturing ideas from the community so we can evaluate them to improve the product, voting, polls, a whole bag of social CRM features which Lithium specialise in that we're able to tap into. So we didn't launch all of those straight away. We had quite a big task just to get the thing off the ground, but it was good to know that we had a good tool bag there that we had somewhere to go in the future. So we also used a company called Right Now Technologies, which I think in the last year or so at least was bought by Oracle. It's part of the Oracle suite now, but at the time it was an independent private company. And they provided the knowledge management software and services and agent management. So knowledge management and things like the FAQs, the how-tos and things like that, which we actually had an idea which has now been implemented, but the launch wasn't quite there, was we would obviously write the FAQs as being this is the correct answer really, or the answer from giffgaff. But really the idea was we wanted the community themselves to start authoring those and improving them, and really a bit like Wikipedia. So the whole knowledge management, knowledge-based piece we want to keep online so customers always had access to the latest information. And also some workforce management elements there because we have a small agents there, so we can routing queries to them through the usual quality monitoring and that kind of thing. Case management is also provided. So for the My giffgaff piece, we needed to have a place where, when customers do make contacts with us, that we can actually keep that history and make sure that it's responded to correctly, and that we can give the customers the service they want when they contact us individually. Obviously, they have the trace and the history on the forum of things that they've raised with the community. So I'll come back in a couple of slides' time to the SaaS layer, and we'll look a bit more, a little bit more detail at that, and in particular how we integrated that in to the rest of the business. But let's look first of all at some of the overall project challenges that we had. So we had around about 8 months from when I joined to actually build an entire mobile operation from scratch, really, and which was everything from the fulfillment life cycle, the website, to be able to buy something online, send it through reliably, implement the regulatory processes that we had to do. They need to be able to top up, so we had to integrate to payment providers. We have PCI compliance issues to deal with. We also, obviously, a big part of it is integrated into the mobile network itself, which, as I mentioned, there was an API that was provided by O2. You also have to think about voicemail and branding, all of that pieces, lost and stolen processes. So there's quite an element of work that we really had to do. And of course, the agents also needed some support infrastructure to help that workflow all in place. So really what we're saying here is I'll focus on the last two elements, the customer service and the community tools, but we really had a much wider context of challenges. So as you've probably gathered by now, the community is really at the heart of giffgaff. That's really what it's all about. It was founded from that right at its core. It wasn't bolted on later on. It was conceived right from the beginning. So we need to really make sure we've got some tools. So why did we decide then to use software as a service to provide these vital functions? So when we were looking at these in particular, I suppose that it would be no surprise to think that I first of all thought, well, we can do that ourselves, can't we? I can just go and get some open source forum software. There's plenty of that about. I can download it. O2 already had some email management type of software floating around that we could perhaps use. So that was the first thought. But really, user-generated content is really quite hard to implement and run properly in a scalable environment. So it's really, for example, you have to be able to predict your capacity, you have to manage peaks and spikes of load. The spam is a big problem on forums. Moderation tools, because of people going on and writing comments that we wouldn't want in terms of profanities and that kind of thing. Tagging, filtering, all those kind of tools that people really expect on forums to be able to use. Kudos, thumbs up, all this levels for badges that users can earn, all that kind of stuff is quite a complex set of requirements really. So we really found those ready-made as software as a service really, a much more compelling opportunity than trying to buy some servers and download some software ourselves. Similarly, on the customer services side, anyone who's worked in the customer services sector or domain will know that it's very complex to install, maintain and roll out customer agent software. So a lot of it, particularly in telco space, is geared up for actually answering calls, which we weren't doing. But we still needed the functions like workforce management, the statistics, quality monitoring and so on. So we needed to get some of those. And we really found that we couldn't really build those. Those are our core functions really. And we didn't really want to reinvent the wheel. There was no point in going out and developing some call center software ourselves. So we really thought that the secret sauce in all of this would be the ability to integrate the components together to make the actual user journeys that we wanted in giffgaff. That's where we wanted to spend our time and effort to make sure that users had the actual experience. We didn't want to spend our precious development time that we only had a few months to in actually reinventing wheels all over the place, and not very good ones at that. So that was when we really started to investigate the SaaS providers as being, this is really something that we want to do. So let's sort of have a look now at how that journey went for us when we actually went to engage with the providers. And all of these items have been mentioned today, so this will not come really as a surprise, but we had two broad fronts that we worked upon. There was the legal and contractual and procurement side of things, and then there was the technical side of things, which was actually getting the servers up and running. So here's a summary of some things that we had to watch out for that were in the contract, in the cloud providers' initial things like T's and C's, which were kind of two-pager boilerplates written in an applicable law that might be outside of the UK. All things we've mentioned before, SLAs, perhaps not given, or perhaps best endeavours given in there. So we really had some time to actually really understand from what did Telefonica want to commit to in terms of the software as a service. And there was a bit of a lead time in getting some of those bespoke terms up and running into the contract. We've talked a lot about location of data as well, and you have to make sure that, because there's obviously a lot of personal data associated with the service and the telco network, so if it's not inside the EU, then we have to look at make sure that the companies were signed up to safe harbour. So I think that the technical engagements overall, from my perspective, it differs very much from a traditional engagement that you might have with an independent software vendor, where you normally have some meetings about the software, you take an evaluation, you then sign a contract, you take that into your test bed, you install it, integrate it, test it, and all that kind of traditional life cycle. So what we really found very helpful for us without timescales and really able to get up and running, and I think this was mentioned in one of the talks earlier on as well, is when the cloud providers actually give you sandboxes that you can tap into. That's really very helpful to evaluate very quickly, is this the service that's right for us? And we found that very, very helpful from the cloud side. So, for example, we had a forum instance up and running, well, as soon as we requested it, we had the keys for it, and we could start playing around and seeing, okay, this is the basic forum, but how do we want to customize that to work to the giffgaff user journeys? There was challenges, of course, with California, because there's different time zone and things like that. So another thing to bear in mind, if you are going to go with a California provider and that's where they're based, then very early mornings or very late nights is kind of when they work best, really. So that was a challenge we had to overcome, to try and get that kind of once a day slot when we could work during the day and then save up our questions for the night. The other thing that I really found was very helpful in terms of the skinning. Cloud services, which are what I would call as white labeled as possible, are very, very helpful. So I don't really want to see any, I want to be able to configure everything on there. And that really, really helps us build in that configuration directly into the website. As you'd have seen, the website is a single website, should look like a single website. So skinning things are very important to us. So let's look at a practical example now of what we had to actually do, and one particular challenge we had to solve in this journey, apart from the skinning journey. So I want to pick out for you the identity management functions, which were key really to getting it working. So the shop is the core central bit of the service. That's where the user data is mastered, and all password management, that's where people log into. But of course, different parts of the site, the forum and the support area of the site, the users can really log in from anywhere. They could have a bookmark, or they could do a search on Google and that takes them straight into a forum thread. They could have a FAQ bookmarked or something like this. So a user can land anywhere. So one of the things that we want that clearly the user shouldn't be able to see the join, shouldn't actually see behind the scenes that we've used as software as a service. They want to be able to work things through. So that was a big part of our integration actually, was to get a single sign-on really working correctly between all these different SaaS providers. So that users would be able to get redirected back to the shop, log in, and then get redirected back to where they were on the original landing page where they ended up, so that it feels very natural. And then we could handle all the lost and stolen, lost password functions and that kind of thing. We'll handle that centrally, and not have to worry about the software, the SaaS provider's own security features. We would have disabled that, and we had to make sure we go through and got any links that they might have had to their own security identity management functions and remove those. So we employed a token-based approach, which is quite normal. I think if we were going to do that today, I think we would probably expect, or I would certainly expect, to be able to see OAuth as an authentication mechanism, which would be a much cleaner way to do this, and much probably easier to integrate. We used something similar. I'm not sure it was OAuth that we used, because I think that at the time was probably not quite as mature as it is now. But we did find that, we did find that both the software providers that we used had different authentication mechanisms. So we had to build in proprietary connectors to actually make them work seamlessly. But what did help us very much was another benefit of the cloud, is that Lithium and Right Now had already worked together before, and they already had a connector in place, which really worked in some of our use cases when we were going, if you couldn't get help on the forum, we wanted to put the question into an agent queue, for example, was one of our use cases, and that worked very well. So there were some things that were pre-integrated, which was very nice. But I think, having said all of that, I don't want to give the impression that we were weeks and weeks on this. It did only actually take 2 or 3 weeks to actually get working, but that was the single biggest integration effort. The other thing that was quite good from a software as a service perspective is there was quite a liberal use of widgets that were provided by both providers, which we were able to then incorporate back onto the main site to actually bring elements of your queries or your case management or your recent things you'd raised on the forum and put those back into the My giffgaff page. So we were able to provide all of that in a central space. So it really was very good integration. So let's look at some of the value-added things, which I would call them, that I think were innovations that really, I think, were provided by the cloud. And I can only compare that to my experience with using independent software vendors, who, of course, do have great products, and they do know, they do provide great software that you can use and has all these features. But I often find that perhaps users of software really have that extra little bit of knowledge of how the software actually works in practice. So the vendors know their product and the configurations and so on, but users really have to understand capacity. They push the software in different ways. They really know their own market. So users of software really are able to push it. And we find that when we use ISVs, we often end up getting a bit more knowledge than the manufacturer itself as to how that software works because of that experience we've gained. So I think that the cloud providers do actually become more battle-hardened than ISVs because they're actually running the service in practice. They get that instant feedback, they know how to capacity manage it, and we can really benefit from that because we really know that it's going to work. It's not just being delivered to us on a disk and we hope it's going to work when we've got all the patches right, but we know it's actually running and working. So that was really opened up to us by using the cloud, and I think that's something that we would have had to have learned all those experiences from ground up, and we really tapped into that. The other thing from the domain expert, if I look at Lithium, they really do understand social CRM, user behaviour on the forums, admin roles, how to run a forum, even how to leverage communities to actually bring benefit. And they really talk very closely with us about the techniques we need to use to actually encourage users to talk to each other, so we're not constantly on the forum trying to spark a conversation. And really, from day one, we didn't have to do that. It just really gelled together very well. And that's something I think you can't really get from an ISV. I think that really has to come from that particular specialism that they had and brought to the table. Something on the right now side of things I've mentioned already, but they were very, very comprehensive. Everything configurable. Everything had to be accessible via a web page, so I had no magic config files or special configurations to make the software work. It was all there on the console, and we could tweak absolutely everything. We could construct all our special use cases that we needed to have for the user journeys on giffgaff, and we were able to do that through the software straight out the box, and that worked very well for us. I mentioned already they've had pre-integrated connectors. It does seem to be a feature of cloud providers that they do work together a lot, so you do often find that cloud services are compatible with each other in more than a superficial way, and they really integrate to each other, and that helps us as well. That's less integration work for us to do when we're rolling out new services. In the future, of course, we really look forward to being able to have lots and lots of features that we can just roll out when we're ready to, and we find that the feature of all the cloud providers we looked at was that they were doing quarterly updates or 6 monthly updates to the software. We didn't have to take them if we didn't want to, which was good, although you had to catch up at some point to stay current. But we could really, without doing anything, let them, in their domain expertise, really track all the innovations. So if it's about forum management, Lithium are on top of all the latest innovations and great ways to run forums, or if it's right now, they know all about handling agents and really tracking that technology and different type of channel management and all that sort of thing. We don't need to worry about that. We know that we're going to get that in a pretty solid roadmap. So that's another reason we don't have to track as a end user or as a service provider. I don't have to worry about those real low level details. That can be farmed out. So that was some of the experience there. So how did it all turn out? So at the time, we had a 3-phase launch back in 2009. We did a blog launch in September, which was really just a press type of thing, really, to explain what giffgaff was, what's its concepts and all that sort of thing. We then launched the forum in October, which was our first bit of user-generated content, where we were able to actually get users in, get them registered, get them on the forum talking to each other. The really interesting thing there was that we didn't have a product in place at this point, but we did have, I can't remember the exact numbers, perhaps around about 1,000 users on the forum talking to each other about giffgaff, about the product, about the mobile phone industry, and that really came from themselves. We didn't get on there and start that debate. That debate came out of anywhere, and we didn't even have a product at that stage. So that was really giving us very early signs that we'd got something right, and there was a real kind of small core community of people that really wanted to talk to each other. So that was very promising. And then we actually followed up in November 2009 and launched the full product, where you could buy the SIM, top up, and so on. So really, I think it's fair to say that we could not have launched really in those timescales without having the SaaS services in place, without having those innovations I mentioned to help us. So that's really as simple as that. The testing went right down to the wire. We had lots of things. If you remember the other things I had going on at the time, we had to integrate with our payments provider, which I'm sure some of you in the room have done that kind of thing before. It was very, very extended process to actually go through that, and right down to the wire we were working with the merchant to try and with the bank, sorry, to try and pass all the final tests. We obviously had lots of mobile network tests to make sure all that bit was running, and all those things we had to do. So really, from my perspective, it was a real joy to actually find that a big part of the service that we needed to really underpin the whole thing on the community and the agent side of things was ready to go out of the box. It was stable, reliable. The core service itself, we had to test the skin and, as I mentioned, the overall identity management pieces, make sure those were actually working correctly. But we didn't have to test things like, I'm going to reply to a post, I'm going to tag something, I'm going to give someone a thumbs up and all that type of thing. Because that just worked, really, and that worked. And that was a very, very powerful thing for us to really make sure we could focus our testing effort elsewhere on things that really made a difference to the business, like getting payments right. The other benefit we had was the business really had a ready-made set of back-end screens to run the business. So I mentioned earlier on that we had the Neolane software, which enabled us to run some of the campaigns and some of the data analytics that we had there as well to examine what people were doing on the website and how they were using the service. But we also had a load of screens to manage the incoming email and all that kind of thing was all ready to go. So from day one, we had business processes in place, which were enabling us to run the service. And I think best of all, we were within budget on the launch, budget on timescale and budget on costs. And we've now matched by using significant parts in the cloud, we've now matched the costs of the cloud service are actually matched to the ongoing sales revenues and the supporting of the customer, which is kind of how you want it to be, really. And that works out very well, so that the cloud will scale along with the business, and that seems to go in the right direction. So that was all just about 2.5 years ago now. So how's it all faring today? So number of awards have been won actually by giffgaff in each year they've been operating actually. So Forrester Research provide a lot of analysis and research into the social CRM side of things based around. There's a very good book actually I recommend to anyone who wants to launch anything to do with social called Groundswell, which is a Forrester Research book, but that's very well worth a read. But they have some awards every year, and they were very early on recognised that giffgaff seemed to be embracing crowdsourcing in a very unique way, and so we got that award very early on in 2010. That was followed by the Marketing Society in 2011, last year. We actually won the Best New Brand, so I thought that's good awareness. The brand's starting to get out there. And this year, I think, was the crowning, really, which is the Mobile Industry Awards, and giffgaff won the Best MVNO. So I think that is a great achievement in just over 2 years of operation, to really get to that level of industry recognition. So on the other side of things, that's from the award side of things, but how did it turn out in terms of the cloud and the things that we put into place? So I think it's true to say that the community powered customer service has really scaled very well. So there was always the thought that did we have to rely on 3 super users on the forum to service lots and lots of customers? Whereas in fact what we found is that as the base grew out, so the various different types of users grew with it. And you do find that you have different types of behaviours online. But some people like to tag things, some people like to reply to posts, some people like to write FAQs and all that sort of thing. So everyone kind of finds the niche they want to do, and that all works very well and scaled very well. So queries are answered very, very quickly. I mean, 90 seconds to get a response is a response that you can actually action and work with. I think it's probably unprecedented with mobile networks. So that's very, very good. You can go on at any time of the day or night and get a response. 3 in the morning, you'll get that response. I checked the network this week, and in the afternoons, there were 2,000 people online. So there's lots and lots of activity. So it's not surprising that you can get any kind of question answered straight away, really. So the other thing, accepted solutions are very good as well. I've mentioned a few times the knowledge management. Accepted solutions are, if you go onto the forum, you can see a number of, well, is it this, is it that? And eventually you'll get to something say, no, this is the right answer here. That gets a tick, bubbles to the top of the pile, and obviously is then searchable going forward. If someone has another problem, they can type that in, and that hopefully an accepted solution comes back. So really we're adding to that knowledge base at a great rate, really, and that's all being generated and validated by the community as we go, so we can really rely upon that content. And of course, the other thing is the ideas generation, which is an incredible pot, really, because I don't know how many businesses could really say that they truly implement over 100 ideas a year that their users of their service, the customers of their service have requested. And that really is a very easy way to build a product roadmap. If you've got a bag of 7,000 things to look at and the community are rating them, bubbling things up to the top, and really actively, I mean, it's you get very, very enthusiastic contribution. If you go on and have a look at the ideas management, people go in there with diagrams, screenshots, different ideas, but really detailed proposals for propositions, and then people comment on them and improve them and all that kind of thing. So it's a very, very kind of innovative place that we've built there for the customers to come in, and we can just take those and then implement them on top of that. So hopefully what I wanted to do this afternoon in that time is just give you a flavour of some of the innovations that we got from using the cloud to produce an innovative service. So that's the end of my presentation. I don't know if there's any questions. Oh, yes.
Just a quick question about your user base there. It's very interesting, the knowledge base and
Yes.
creating that.
Yes.
Is that specific to that community, would you think, or is there evidence of that outside that community which you would start with? Or is it just evidence of the younger generation community?
Right, so is it just the younger generation? I'd say it's probably largely the younger generation, although not exclusively. I think across the demographics, it would be true to say that we get user participation. I think it's naturally skewed towards the younger end, but we are seeing participation across the generations as well.
Do you look at that as a statistics of what's coming in? Do you have any idea of what the user base is?
What the demographics is, yeah. Not off the top of my head, no. I don't have that, no. Yes?
Are there any issues with intellectual capital? Like people, if they give you ideas, can they claim ownership of the product?
Ah, yes, very good question. So they can't claim ownership of the product, so there are some T's and C's associated with giving ideas. I'm probably on shaky ground trying to give the exact legal position, but that is all in the T's and C's. But the idea being really is that you give the contribution, and it's a giffgaff contribution because it's the giffgaff product set, really. So that's really the core principle around that. So yeah, but yes, I think I'd refer for the detailed answer, refer to the T's and C's, which are displayed prominently on the page. Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.